I think sometimes people hear PTSD and it's like this all-encompassing type thing. It's, everybody's different. My anxieties, my frustrations, your way of handling these stresses, you lose your ability to handle yourself in certain situations or handle the situation that other people don't have issues with. I've been trying to push myself, have the counseling I do now. The idea is to kind of refocus myself and my energies and change my entire train of thought. When I go out with the uncertainties of crowds, that your mind starts thinking differently with. And I'm just trying to train my mind to think differently, to where it's not going to feel anxiety and things like that. She was a beautiful distraction because my attention is constantly on her. So there's no room in my brain to worry about anything else. At times, she's been a huge part of my improvements. Family's very supportive. My wife and my daughter. That's part of our day-to-day living. That's a lot different from others. And my daughter is growing up. Eventually she'll really know that things are a little different here than other households maybe.
I originally started this project when I met two widows, and they both shared with me that their husbands had had multiple deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan and came home in one piece, and then they both killed themselves on the streets of their hometown. And when I heard that, I almost couldn't believe it. And then when I started really doing the research and I realized that this is happening 22 times every single day, and families are being devastated and children are left fatherless. And as an artist, this is a story that I could tell that might really be able to make a difference in the lives of so many people. I called the show Depicting the Invisible because it's an invisible wound. It's no less devastating than lots of other wounds of war, but because it's invisible, it's so much harder to get help for. There's a certain expectation that you must be fine because you look fine. And I think it's really important to, as a community, come together and destigmatize issues of mental health and recognize PTSD as a wound of war and get our veterans the help they need. I think that each of the stories are stories that tell the experience of PTSD from a slightly different point of view. And that, I think, is really important because there is no one way to experience PTSD. So Rusty, who's in a wheelchair and paralyzed from the neck down, says how much he would prefer to have physical injuries than PTSD because that's how debilitating PTSD is.
I know from my company and my battalion, we've lost more guys that I know personally since we've been home than we lost while we were deployed from overdoses and suicides. The biggest problem is feeling alone. You come back and you have these thoughts and you're back home, you're not around those guys anymore. So that being alone can really drive you to do some terrible things. And I try to tell people all the time, civilians, veterans, everywhere, when you're having a bad day, there's always someone in a worse situation than you. I was in the VA hospital for 16 months and lived there and had roommates that were worse off, and just there's always people that are struggling a little bit more than you, and if they can make it, you can make it also. So it's always trying to find the light and the positivity that's there.
As I was seeking out more veterans to participate in this project, I was introduced to Sarah and Vinny LaSorsa, who are the founders of Freedom Fighters Outdoors, which does these amazing outdoor trips for veterans suffering from PTSD. And I explained to them the portrait series I was doing, and I wanted to, we were going to publish a book of the portraits and raise money for veterans who are suffering from PTSD. They said, well, you know, instead of us just, introducing you, why don't you come next week to Florida and go on one of our fishing trips, and you can meet them all and you can ask them to do it. So I did. I went down to Florida. They couldn't have been more gracious. I went out on one of the fishing boats and I watched these veterans blossom, just open up and blossom. It was just remarkable, even in the few days that I was there, to see the difference, the camaraderie. Intentionally made the photography very classically elegant. It's black and white, slightly heroic. I wanted that elegance to be in sharp contrast with the brutality of their stories. So it sort of brings you in, and then you realize what the story is. So if you'll notice, every single subject is making direct eye contact with the camera, with the viewer. And it's forcing people to bear witness, because it's hard to look away when somebody's making eye contact.
So my Alive Day gave me a chance to be better in life, treat people better. Man, like, it sure does seem to hurt now every time, much more inside when you hear about guys that do die because we got that other chance. And we get to be here today and live on their names. And if we didn't have that Alive Day to celebrate, we'd be talking about us being, one of the fallen heroes. We're not what we did in war. We're not that person, but we still live it. And just go into your communities, and any way you can help another veteran, whether it be going fishing with you or referring them to a veteran nonprofit such as Freedom Fighter Outdoors. Help get guys and girls out of the house and around more veterans, because it's the best therapy you can have.
I'd like to point out Danielle. She's one woman in this show, and I think that it's really important to understand women and PTSD.
I joined because of my daughter, because she was very sick. She had bronchitis. We had no health insurance. I went to the recruiter and I asked them if they would give me health insurance if I joined. And they told me, yes, the moment that you sign, you get health insurance. I got my duty station and I left for Fort Lewis, Washington. I was approached by people that didn't have the greatest intentions, but I managed to get through it. And I felt like my fellow enlistees were against me. My sergeant, my staff sergeant, they were the ones that were behind me. Because when I first came home, I was a victim. Then through everything I did, I was a survivor. Never once did I turn the table and say, well, he was wrong. Everybody knows it happens. There's movies made on it that women have been assaulted or they've been abused domestically or whatever. They just sweep it under the rug and they say, oh, that was just a movie. No, that's real life. That really does happen. And if you don't start accepting it, there will be no change. And that's why I make sure that my child, as being a young woman, is strong and independent. And if something happens to her, she better scream at the top of her lungs until people listen.
This is Brewster. He's just an absolutely magnificent human being. I want to share with you his story. I'm deployed in Iraq. I'm the driver. A bomb went off, big explosion. It was so fast, so loud. Are we alive? We lost communications. We couldn't open the doors. The vehicle is so heavy, it operates on a hydraulic system. We were trapped. Most of the guys I deployed with committed suicide. I ended up homeless. 2 years is a long time to live on the street. Chadwick Parker was an Iraqi vet, a dear friend of mine. One day he calls the cops and tells them that he's shooting babies. Then he shot himself. I couldn't understand why all these vets were killing themselves until that's what I wanted to do. I can't explain how tempting suicide can seem. I had such depression, alone, tormented internally, Black. I met Paul at the VA PTSD program. We graduated. He went home. He dropped his girls off at their school and then he shot himself. I keep his obit in my car. It motivates me to live my best life every day. I fell out of a vehicle and my foot got sheared off, but I don't want to talk about me, about my injuries. If you're so depressed because of PTSD, drinking yourself to death or taking all the pills the VA gives you is not the answer. I met a vet at a fishing event. 2 weeks later, he killed himself. You can't be that selfish. You've got to say, I'm going to stay alive for my kids, for my wife, for my brothers who look up to me. Recently, I got introduced to yoga. I feel together mentally, physically, spiritually. I've been listening to an audiobook, Why Buddhism is Real. It says there's more important things than what's on the surface. You can still think. You've still got your mind. Stephen Hawking, look at all the contributions he can still make. I've peer mentored at least 100 guys over the last 10 years. Helping is my therapy. Artist note, Damon's mother called. Damon has passed away. Suicide.
It's not like you see on TV where, it's like, I'm sitting up in bed screaming every single night and, going on these anger sprees and all. It's not like that. when they see these portraits, that's the real, you know, PTSD that you can, that is as real as you get. Really just want you to see the person, but at the same time, I want you to see what it's really like. I want someone to look at the portrait and say, wow, imagine what it's like having these things going on day to day, every single day, and maybe they'll be able to step into our shoes a little bit. By the time they walk out of that exhibit, maybe they haven't got it so bad, or maybe they've got it, you know, maybe they've got something going on similar, and they want to reach out to one of the resources. You know, I mean, that's really what I want people to take away.